There you go. Okay. So it is now recording us. I'm ready to go when you are.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, awesome.
Welcome to the Tiger Nexus Podcast, a place where you'll find interviews with content creators and geeks alike. Your host, Ty Tiger, has delved upon the Nexus and found interesting content creators and geeks of all fandoms. This podcast is connected to the Zero Hero Network. And now we dive in with another episode!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tiger Nexus podcast. I'm your host, of course, Ty Tiger, and today I'm joined by a person I found on TikTok. I've been following this person for a good couple of years now. They're currently sat on 270-something thousand followers, which is bananas. He's a massive nerd, complete and utter geek, which I cannot wait to dive in and just completely geek out. I'm going to use his TikTok name here for a second, but of course he can introduce himself properly now. But introducing the Grey Matters blog. Hello, bro. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Hello to all your followers. I am the Grey Matters blog on TikTok. That's actually what we go by on all social media. You can call me Gray. My name is Wes Gray. But everyone on, for my handle mostly just calls me Gray.
Well, first off, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, I've been following you for a good couple of years now. I've actually stitched you a good couple of times because you ask a lot of very geeky and very interesting questions on TikTok.
Oh yeah, I really enjoy it. I really enjoy following everyone's stitches. Unfortunately, I don't get to see everyone's because there's thousands of people who do them. But I love getting to hear what people's answers are because that's the whole fun of asking the hypothetical questions is finding out what people's answers are.
Yeah. So first off, let me ask you this: what started you on TikTok? Why did you make the account? What started you on this journey?
Well, that's actually a really interesting story that I actually did a video on even kind of recently, which is that both me and my wife are writers, and years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago now, me and my wife were talking, and she decided she wanted to get really, really serious about her writing career. And of course, anything we do together. I support her completely. So that meant everything I was going to do going up to this was going to support her. So I started getting back into my writing because up until that point, we hadn't been writing really seriously. And so I started writing shorts. We started a blog. That's actually why we're called The Grey Matters Blog, because originally it was just a blog. The blog is still up. We still update it periodically, where you can go read a bunch of our short stories, short fictions, microfictions, poetry, all that kind of stuff. So we started that, and of course, no one reads blogs anymore. That's one of those, we were kind of behind the times. They're just not super popular. That's not where people go. So as we were doing that, we're like, okay, this isn't being super successful. We really need to hit up social media. So we hit Facebook, but of course, as forever behind the times, Facebook also wasn't really the place to be. And then some of my friends started telling me about, oh, hey, you should check out TikTok. I actually, saw some stuff. I'm like, okay, there's some good nerdy content going on over there. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know anything about it. Started checking it out. We jumped over there. Now, and all of this we're doing all this to support my wife's book called Rhymes and Stone that she was currently writing at the time. Didn't even exist yet. So we started listening. So we started working on this. I started doing TikToks. At first, we were really focused on doing like writer advice to other writers because I'm like, okay, this is something I can talk about. This is something that people are interested in because there are huge groups of people who are supporting other small independent writers. And that worked okay, but you're only going to get so big doing that because there's only so many other writers out there. That doesn't really get you in contact with readers, and it doesn't get us in contact with the people who will eventually want to be reading her books. So I'm like, okay, I got to find other stuff to do to reach out. So then the channel became more sharing my writing and like our poems. I have a poem called Spider in the Mirror that when I shared that one, it actually got really popular. So that actually was our first big bump to getting to the channel to grow. And then when we really got to experience some growth and got to be, and kind of got some wind under our wings was whenever we started asking hypothetical questions. Now, there were some other channels out there doing hypothetical questions at the time, but they were doing them very differently. They were doing them way short. They weren't giving tons of detail. It was just, would you do this or this? Let me know. And I mean, they were like, 10-second videos. So, and one channel that actually I give lots of credit to, I still talk to him all the time, his channel is called Future Ghosty. And he that's one of the first people I saw doing these nerdy hypotheticals, but I mean, not in any way to talk bad about him. He's fantastic and he inspired me. He's really cool. I think now he mostly spins vinyl, which is an interesting turn for him. But he did these things. So I'm like, man, I want to do that, but I want to put my spin on it. So I started talking about these hypotheticals, but giving more details, giving caveats. That's why the kind of catchphrase is caveats by the end. Because that was a big thing, is I wanted there to be a little more detail, to be a little more thought-provoking. And then turns out hypotheticals were the thing, took off, and so now we have just, that's really gotten the channel to where it is. Now, of course, I always want to say, I mean, we know who we are. We don't have an overinflated sense of ourselves. 270K is decent on TikTok. There are people with 4.5 million. So, I mean, we're happy with where we are. And in fact, I'd rather have a good-sized channel like we have, with very dedicated people who really care about us, because our followers we have tons of engagement. Those guys who have 1 million, sometimes those people don't even barely know who they are. They're just following them. Whereas pretty much our 270K, those are all people who are really interested in us and really part of our community. And that's why we love that. We love all the guys who follow us. And that's how we have kind of this tight network. And that's kind of how we came to be to where we're at now.
Yeah, man, I think I've been following you for 1 second. Let me just look at my calendar here real quick. I've been following you for how long? How long have you been uploading on TikTok for?
3-4 years, something in that ballpark.
I think it's been almost 3 years I've been following you for, round about.
So
yeah, that checks out pretty well.
Yeah, so as good as from the beginning.
Yeah, realistically, I think I think when I started following you, I don't think you had reached. You definitely weren't the triple-digit K just yet. You hadn't reached 100,000 at this point, so it's definitely before that.
Oh, then yeah, basically from the beginning, because we reached triple digits within like the first few months. I mean, 6 months, 7 months. So yeah, you're definitely an OG for sure.
I am an OG. I was going to say, because you mentioned you talking about the poem, The Spider in the Web, Spider in the Mirror, and I believe I remembered that video. So I've been around for a hot second. And like I said, I've stitched you a couple times because like you said, you wanted to expand. You definitely dive into more. You explained stuff, and I think that's one of the reasons why I started stitching you, because you're not just asking a question. You're actually kind of explaining. One of my it actually popped up my newsfeed. Emotional superpowers. I think you did it was on this day. When TikTok allows you to repost. That popped up my newsfeed the other day, and I was like, oh my god, I remember that video. And like the way that you're just talking about it and you're just explaining. And it definitely gives people who want to stitch or want to at least answer in your comment section. It gives people a bit more to think about, people to ponder on. And you dive into so much different stuff as well. We're talking like sci-fi, fantasy. We're talking like you talked about. You've referenced Helldivers before, which is a video game. Cyberpunk and all sorts of stuff. You go around the whole bend. You're not just in one sort of niche or genre. You go everywhere. So would you say you're definitely a person who's dipped your toes into like all of the geeky genres? Do you think you're definitely one of them?
Absolutely. I would definitely kind of consider myself in the Renaissance nerd territory, because I mean, if it's in the geeky nerdy realm, I probably at least have some interest in it, even if not in every single niche. Because video games, of course, huge. You mentioned Helldivers, because I got really big into that. I did like most of the Helldivers community. I fell out with it because they were having some issues. My big thing I'm into now because of Space Marine 2 is getting big into Warhammer 40K. Warhammer 40K is one of those interesting fandoms that I've wanted to be into for years, But because the minifig game, the actual war game of the tabletop game of Warhammer 40K is so hard to get into, it's very expensive, and you have to have people who know how to play it. That's very inaccessible for most people. I love the lore, I love the Space Marines, the universe, the Chaos Gods, all that, but it's very inaccessible. So until there have been more stuff to get into it. But I love I hadn't been into it as much, but I love the Warhammer 40K lore, and of course, I'm into Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who. I mean, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones. I mean, anime, manga. I mean, pretty much if it's in the nerdy field, I'm probably into it.
Yeah, see, like, I think that's another reason why so many people enjoy your content, because you don't just stick to one particular thing. You don't just stick to, for example, you mentioned Star Wars and Star Trek, like sci-fi stuff. You don't just stick to that. You're not just sci-fi. You've delved into other things, and I think it also surprises people as well, because I think you will stick to, a couple of your videos you post in a row will be about kind of the same genre for a couple of videos, and then all of a sudden you just completely flipped around to something else. You just flip the cake completely, and it's a completely different genre. And I think that is another reason why people enjoy your content so much, is because you talked about like Marvel and DC, you talked about you've mentioned anime a couple times as well, and like you've gone from, I'm looking at your TikTok account now, you have one where you're talking about Jedi or Space Marine, and then your next video is literally dubbed Roll for Power Plant Magic. By the way, Jedis and Space Marines have nothing to do with plant magic, so like it's completely two different genres, and it's fantastic. And yeah, it's like, it's just really cool to see. And like I said, I've been around for a couple of years, so like watching you, you're saying 270k isn't a lot. That's a big feat to stand on, man. That's something you should be proud of, for sure. As of recording this, I think you're one of the people who've had the biggest following on the podcast. So
wow.
that's absolutely awesome. And yeah, TikTok can be good for a lot of things. A lot of people shit on TikTok. TikTok does get a lot of flack. But like, I've made friends through TikTok. The podcast is in the 30 number now, and I believe a good 20 episodes of my podcast, the guests have been through TikTok, including yourself. So like, TikTok can be good for some stuff.
Yeah, and after we're done recording, I'll have to have you let me know when this will be live, so I can talk about it on my, so I can talk about it on my TikTok channel, so we can get some people to come here and listen to the cool talk we've had, because it's already been super fun. So I definitely want people to get to come here and check it out. One of the things that's great about TikTok, and it's why we ended up kind of focusing on TikTok, because I tried YouTube, I tried Instagram, I tried Facebook, all that kind of stuff. Either like Facebook, they're all out of date, and just everyone's grandparents are on there. That's not it's not super helpful for me.
That is great. I love that. I love the way you explained that. Facebook is just for everyone's grandparents.
And mostly their grandparents aren't going to buy our book, which is the ultimate idea. We want to get our book out in front of people. Now but TikTok, out of all the other ones, YouTube and Instagram, which are big places where people can do well, the problem is they don't like promoting small channels. You can make stuff on there, and they are going to be super hesitant to even put it in front of people. One thing I got to say about TikTok, because you're 100% right, it has problems. There's definitely things I hate about it. I mean, like with a passion, me and them have gone round and round. But I will say they will put your stuff in front of eyeballs. And then if those eyeballs like it, if they watch it, then they'll put it in front of them some more. That's one thing they're pretty fair about. They will put your stuff in front of people, and then those people, they really do pay attention to if those people watch your stuff. And now don't get me wrong, there's a lot of shenanigans that go on with the algorithm that don't always do it completely fairly. But at the end of the day, if people want to see your stuff, they will, if they legitimately. So that's one of the things that gave us an ability to grow on TikTok when we just weren't growing anywhere else.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I'm also a writer. I've been writing since I was a kid. And I write stories and fan fictions. I put them on YouTube as audio dramas. I've got voice actors and stuff. It's really cool. And I've kind of like, my TikTok account, was just for fun. When I first made my TikTok account, it was just because at the time and when it was made, it was just because of pure boredom. Life was just going down, so I thought, hey, let's make a TikTok account for no reason. But now, for the last 2 weeks, I've gone to, I've sat down and thought about what do I want to talk about. I was like, do you know what? Let's talk about. And the YouTube channel's called Tiger Tales, and I was like, let's talk about Tiger Tales. Let's explain everything because all of my stories from fan fictions are connected in ways. And I've actually had a couple comments, people going, okay, that's really cool. Explain this more. So I have done, and then I've noticed that my subscriber count's gone up a little bit, 1 or 2, by numbers. So people are paying attention slowly. So yeah, you're definitely right. If when people find something they want to watch, they'll definitely, and even if they don't, I mean, I've had this discussion with people on TikTok before. I've gotten hate comments, and then I've replied to the hate comments, and then they're like, "Oh, why do your videos keep popping up on my newsfeed?" I'm like, "Because you're interacting with me, duh."
Absolutely.
You do realize TikTok's not a human being. It doesn't understand. You're interacting with something. TikTok's like, oh, you like this video? Sure, have more. It doesn't understand. So either way, even if you get hate comments and stuff, you're still gonna get your videos watched.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's entire channels that they thrive off the hate. That's their whole thing. Is they make the now. I try to stay away from that as a general rule, just because that's what whenever my wife and I decided we were going to make this channel, there were a few things we knew specifically we wanted to do and didn't want to do, and one of them is we wanted to kind of embrace nerdy stuff because we're both giant nerds. We're into all kinds of nerdy stuff, so we kind of wanted to be all inclusive of all of that stuff. We didn't want to be one of those type of people that are like, oh, my kind of nerdism is good. Star Wars is great, but Star Trek is stupid or whatever. Whatever where we hated on certain people's interests. We definitely didn't want to do that. We wanted to be overall very positive. That was one of the things, is because, and I do feel like that comes across in our videos, at least I hope it does, where we try to have very positive energy because positive energy tends to return to you. So we try to put that out there. And of course, the other one, not related to that, but it was kind of the third rule, which is that we were not going anywhere near politics, which is funny because at a specific time, we actually got some hate for that, weirdly. You wouldn't think so, but we did. But that's part of our thing because I'm not looking to alienate anybody. I'm looking to be able to talk with people who are like-minded, other nerds, and be able to share this stuff without dragging a bunch of artificially divisive BS into it. So yeah, we always try to keep it super positive, and so far I feel like we have a really good positive community.
Yes, how dare you, talk about lightsabers and dragons and not bring up politics? God damn it, man. Jesus. How dare you,
Yeah, where do I get off, right?
Yeah, exactly. How rude of you, because that makes perfect sense. You said your wife's writing a book. You've talked about it a little bit on TikTok. Do you mind explaining a little bit about them? You don't have to go into grave detail, of course, but can you kind of I want you to explain the book to us.
Oh, absolutely. The book the book that started it all is called Rhymes in Stone. And it actually is completed now. It is available on Amazon or on Amazon electronic format. In paperback, it's available literally anywhere you can buy a book. We've actually found that a lot of people in other countries like Germany have better luck finding it not on places that aren't Amazon. But pretty much if you can buy a book there, our book is there. And it's called Rhymes in Stone, and it is we're calling it a paranormal mystery. It is a modern day setting where supernatural stuff is happening. The genre was actually kind of an interesting thing if we had to kind of pick what genre we wanted to call it. Initially, I was going to call, we kind of wanted to call it an urban fantasy, because usually when you say urban fantasy, it's the modern day setting with supernatural creatures like vampires, werewolves, the fae, maybe angels and demons, depending on the, thing. The problem, and that fits our story. The problem is that it also tends to have a connotation of grittiness, which definitely isn't there. I'll get to the actual synopsis here in a second. But it also tends to, because urban fantasy tends to have a lot of writers who put a lot of romance in their books. So it tends to have a major romance subplot or even main plot, which is also definitely not what this book is. So it was kind of giving people, when we kind of did some test audiences, hey, if we call it this, do you know what it means? people weren't really getting the right vibe. So we went with paranormal mystery because because ultimately it is about the main character being put in this situation that she has to get to the bottom of, and there are supernatural things that happen. So the actual plot is there is a young girl named Addie. She is just about to turn 18, and she is in a horrible, abusive home with her mother, and gets a letter from a law firm saying that she has just inherited a bunch of money. She's just inherited a giant house, and that she will now be able to do whatever she wants with this weird inheritance that she starts to check out, realizes it's legitimate. She is also experiencing memory loss of anything that happened before she was 6. So anytime she sees something or hears something that reminds her of her life before she was 6, she experiences a seizure. As soon as she reads the name of the person, Isaac Hart, that she inherits this money from, she experiences a seizure. So whoever this is relates to her past. And then, of course, that's kind of the elevator pitch kind of thing. And of course, once she starts getting into it, we're not too worried about kind of spoiler territory, but folklore comes into it. She realizes that some of these people involved in her past are not human. There's definite fae elements. There are a lot of the supernatural. That's the flavor of supernatural elements we're dealing with here is the fae. And overall, it's her trying to find out what's going on with the inheritance, what's going on with these creatures, why they're interested in her, and then ultimately who's trying to kill her.
Well, I get paid in 2 weeks. I may have to buy a book on Amazon. I may have to tell my fiance that if there's a book coming in from Amazon and with my name on it, just leave it on the desk. It's all good.
The electronic copy is very cheap if you like ebooks. If not, the paperback is still not bad. One thing I will say that we are very excited about is we are currently in production on an audiobook, which I am so stoked for.
Ooh, I definitely do like an audiobook, and I'd buy the book only because, and this is gonna make me sound like I'm 90, but I believe that you should always read books because it's good for the trees sacrifice themselves for the books. Paper. Not many kids read books these days. Books are a dying thing, and books are very good. So I'd happily buy the book.
Yeah, I'm actually a huge. I'm one of those people. I'm much in the way I am with my nerdy interest. I'm also this way with my medium because I read paper books because they work when the power's out. I read books on my phone. I listen to books as I drive. If there is a way to consume a book, I'm probably consuming it that way.
Yeah, I'm a big. Well, I say big. I've just gone back into comic book collecting, and I was waiting for my son to talk to his mother on the phone, and my fiance walked in, and she walked into my office and found me reading a comic book, and she was like, "I've never seen you sat there reading a book." Yeah, sure, but not a comic book. I was like, "Hey, I bought this the other day. I need to, And she's like, "It's actually good to see you read comic books." Like, yeah, I know. Like, it's also a good feeling, like walking to a bookstore or comic book store and kind of buying something you can read, And I've got plenty of books like series and stuff. Books are good, man. But the kids should read more books. I'm trying to get my son. He's 5. He's really into like Pokemon and things. So like we've bought Pokemon books. So like I'm reading to him. They are the episodes just turned into books, which that's literally what they are. But at least he's interested in the books now as well, and stuff like that. So I'm slowly getting him into that. When he gets a bit older, I really want him to read like Harry Potter to him.
For sure.
Percy Jackson, because I know for a fact he'll love Percy Jackson, and things like this. There's a good little bookstore that's about half an hour drive from me. It's actually called the Children's Bookshelf, and it goes from like little kids books to teenage books, and a lot of books I grew up on, they sell them, so I'm like, right, I'm gonna slowly buy these book series, so when my son gets into that sort of like age range, I can start reading these like really cool stories to him and stuff. So yeah, but books are definitely something that not everyone can read books or likes reading books. That's fair, and that's why I said audio drama is also really good, because like I feel like I'd rather, if I had the choice of something on a pad or a laptop or something like digital, listening to it or reading on a book, I'd say the digital would be the last thing. I'm happy to listen to audio because people put time and effort into making it into an audio, and things like this. And like I said, I turn my own stories and fan fictions into audio dramas for people to listen to. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work. So I respect the process. So it's like I'm happy to listen to an audiobook happily.
Yeah,
How long has it taken you to actually turn your book into an audiobook?
Well, we really just began the process a couple of weeks ago. Our current goal is to have we've been back and forth with our narrator, and hopefully by a little after Halloween we should have it live.
Oh, very cool.
So we're working on that. That's super cool. I will go ahead and plug a really good friend of ours who's helping us with this that we kind of ended up partnering with, because we're actually not going to be on Audible, because that's of course where most people find their audiobooks these days. Yeah. But of course it's owned by Amazon and they're evil, because that's just how big companies work. It's not their fault, they just are. And we, and of course, the thing is, it's so expensive to get an audiobook made, especially to the level that you need to put it on something like Audible. And so we just didn't think we were going to get to do that. Me and my wife both love audiobooks. Like I said, I love books in all formats, but audiobooks are really great. I listen to them a lot, and we really wanted her book to be an audiobook, but it was going to cost us thousands of dollars that we don't have. We had to bootstrap the entire thing. This is all, So we just knew, we had enough money to get it published in paperback and e-format, but not enough to get it published in audio. Well, then a guy named Ken came to us, who is starting a brand new company called Audio with an H. And their entire thing is to be like Netflix, but for audiobooks. So instead of going to Amazon and having to, buy each individual audiobook you want to listen to, you just buy your subscription to audio and then listen to all the audiobooks you want.
That's actually really cool.
Oh yeah, we're the app is out now, Audio with an H. You can find it on either one. Now, I will say to everyone who wants to check it out, they literally just had their launch like 4 days ago, so they still don't have a ton of books live on the app yet. That I think there's there's a pretty decent handful. I think there's 100 or so. But we're not up to the thousands they're going to have, but they need some time to get them on there. So we're very much in here at the very beginning of this app. So he partnered with us and he said, "Hey, I want to help you guys make your audiobook a reality." And so that's what we're doing. We have an amazing voice actor named Raven Diamond. She's on TikTok if you want to check her out at Raven Diamond, who is working on our book for us. She's so we're so happy with her. We're really excited to hear it. And so when our book does come out, it's going to be on audio. So it'll be on an actual streaming platform.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that. That's awesome. It's also like, yes, they're helping you, but in a way you're helping them, because obviously you're talking about your book on your TikTok account. You'll tell people that's audio, and then when people go, "Hey, where can I listen to the audio?" You're also going to be technically, by explaining where to find it, promoting them. So it's almost kind of like you're helping each, So that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, no, and it worked out great. Ken Barton there is a great dude. He's he partnered with us. Of course, he was looking for some writers who are like us, that are big but not too big. Because that's always the thing. It's really fun whenever you're trying to find people to do certain things with on TikTok or any social media, is you want to find someone big enough to be to be exciting, that people know about. But if they're too big, then they're not even going to then they didn't even see your message. So you got to find that sweet spot. And we were kind of a good sweet spot for him to be a good test drive for this, for the thing of getting these books on his website or on his app there.
Yeah, that's really cool, dude. Well done. That's awesome. And I'll definitely buy the book, and if I can find the app, I'll definitely check that out as well, because I'm always looking for new books to listen to whilst I'm editing my podcast, my YouTube videos, or whatever. So it's always good to find new things to listen to.
Yeah, I do highly recommend it. Of course, I'm biased. I think the book's amazing because I'm the co-author with Sharon, so of course I think it's good. But her writing is actually really fantastic. One of the things she has going for her is that her writing is incredibly easy to read. Everyone that I've talked to who's read the book, they talk about how fast they breeze through it. She just has a very smooth, easy, entertaining style. She's like me. she's very funny, has kind of a dry humor, and it just kind of carries you from one thing to the next in the book. And of course, it has a lot of fantastic action and some really great monster design. That's actually something she's kind of famous for, is excellent monster design. She's actually been published in a few different things. One of which is I always like to mention the you've heard of the Netflix series Love, Death, and Robots.
Yes, absolutely love that show. Absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite Netflix shows, and I can never talk to anyone because no one knows what the fuck it is.
No, I absolutely adore it too. We watched it forever. Well, the publication that it gets its stories from is a couple of short story collections. One is called Love, Death, and Robots, and the other one is called Snafu. Some of the different stories that they got their things to make Love, Death, and Robots from are actually from Snafu, not Love, Death, and like the one with the dog soldiers, the werewolf American soldiers. That one's from Snafu. So the collection Snafu is one of the ones they take their stuff from. Sharon has been published in Snafu.
Oh wow, that's really cool.
Now she's not on Love. I want to be clear. Her story is not an episode of Love, Death, and Robots, as much as we would love that. But what they were going for sort of Western themes, and her story is called Hot Blood and Iron, and it's essentially about a town with a vampire sheriff being attacked by the Wild Hunt.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Oh, it was super cool, and the reason, and what brought me around to this entire story is when the guy published her story. Basically, what he told her was, it's a little different than what we would normally choose, but God, your monsters are so cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So she's really good at coming up with these incredibly interesting monsters. To nerd out a little bit, on her in Rhymes and Stone, of course, the Fae are one of the main creatures, and there are kind of the light, Seelie-esque Fae that tend to be very pretty and all that kind of stuff. Then there are also other Fae that, it's not a distinction so much made in her book, that are more of the unseelie Fae, and specifically a court of the Boogies. And these are a lot of the monstrous, frightening Fae, and her designs of her different Boogies, of course, one of the main characters is called Tommy Rawhead and Bloody Bones, which if you're big into Fae mythology at all, he's a very major character. And some of her designs, she has Spring Heel Jack, which is, of course, a Victorian serial killer that she's turned into a boogie. And just a lot of these characters, their physical designs are just really interesting and creepy. And so she's just really good at that.
Yeah, that's really cool. See, one thing that I absolutely love about, because, again, I've listened to you talk about, your wife for a while, and you mentioned her quite a few times, especially when you talk about Rhymes and Stone. And one thing that I absolutely love hearing is when a content creator of any kind has a very supportive spouse, or they work with their spouse, and quite often, and I really have to sometimes have to explain myself because I ask these questions and they kind of I can hear their facial expression judging me, but I ask about spouses because I have Tiger Tales, which is my audio YouTube channel. I game on YouTube. I do different stuff on YouTube, and I've been with my fiance now for going on 5 years. I've been engaged for 2, and one of the best things about her is she may not be into everything I'm into, definitely nowhere near into everything I'm into, but she will spend her time, she'll look at my rota, because I've got a rota for each channel, and she will make sure that she goes onto YouTube, she'll go onto each video, she'll watch it for about 60 seconds, because YouTube counts 60 seconds as a view, she'll like it, and she just spends her time doing that, making sure each video just gets a bit of progress up the algorithm, and it's that's just really sweet of her. She doesn't have to do it, but she does it anyway. So I'm always curious to see how other content creators' spouses, kind of handle their content and things like this. And the fact that you're working with your spouse is just fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. Her supporting me and me supporting her, that's the biggest thing. That's why we're able to be as successful as we are. Her, whenever she's writing, I'm usually actually I always say I'm kind of her editor / writing partner, because we always whenever she gets the first draft done, she starts reading it to me, and then we go back and forth, and we catch the problems and all that, but we also develop it, and I kind of help her to come up with ideas and polish things to make it sound better and all that kind of stuff. So we work really closely together on that. It's really funny. My wife actually is part of a lot of writing groups with other writers. And one of the things they always are so desperate for is writing partners, other people who are willing to help them and help them edit and just be a general and have a person who is a writer who wants to help you. And Sharon always tells them, well, I had a writing partner, so I wanted to lock him down, so I married him. And they're all like, that is totally the right thing to do. If you have a writing partner, just marry them. It's the best thing to do.
Yeah, I have a best friend. He's my parabatai, and sadly he lives in America. There's 6 hours time difference between us. But he also writes stories and turns them into audio dramas and things, and we're into a lot of the same stuff. And even when we're not into the same things, because there's like certain animes he's into that I'm not, there's certain games I'm into that he's not, we're always talking. Like, whilst we've now been recording for a little while now, almost 40 minutes, he's messaged me about 4 times asking me questions, because like, we bounce ideas off each other and our stories are connected, and we're into like different cartoons and Power Rangers and Marvel and DC and stuff, and I'm a bit more into the know-how than a lot of people. I know all the comic book lore, and I'll dive into like all sorts of like that sort of thing. So if there's certain piece of information people need to know, they'll always come and ask me. It's like I know stuff, so I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Hang on, So like, it's really cool. Yeah, you're right. It is nice to have someone to bounce off. Especially if you're into the same stuff as well. That's really helpful.
Yeah, and I know what you mean about kind of being the repository of lore, because I'm kind of the same way. If it's at all nerdy, my friends will usually ask me about it, and I usually, if I don't know a lot about it, I guarantee I at least know a little. I kind of have a little jack of all trades thing going on. So I could, and that's the thing. Everyone just assumes I know, and they're usually right.
Well, I work with they're all on TikTok. A Crown, Mark the Corn Stranger, and Cosplay Dude 637. Cosplay Dude is my parabatai. He's my best friend, and they're all 4 of us are writers. We all upload audio dramas. We turn our fan fictions and storylines into audio dramas for people to listen to across podcast platforms and YouTube and things. And all 3 of them will say that my mind runs a mile a minute, because someone will come to me with like a story dilemma. Like, it happened earlier today. Cosplay Dude's working on a Danny Phantom continuation of some sorts. He wants to, like, because Danny Phantom, the cartoon, kind of got cancelled, so he wants to continue it. And he came to me, he's like, hey, I have an idea for a new bad guy. So he kind of like explains everything to me, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, this is very one-dimensional villain. It kind of like, he's a bad guy for the sake of being it. So I gave him an alternative, and I said to him, I was like, well, how about you do this? And then he was instantly like, yeah, dude, no, that's perfect. Like, how the hell did you do that? I was like, I don't actually know.
I absolutely get you about the my mind working a mile a minute. I have ADHD fairly bad, which of course I didn't know when I was a kid. I just thought, hey, I can't focus. Sucks to suck. I better get good. I didn't know that was a thing.
Same.
Now, because when I was a kid, I'm almost 40 now, and when I was a kid, ADHD was a thing. They would my best friend was diagnosed with it. The thing was, back then, pretty much ADHD meant you caused problems in school. That was it. They would diagnose you with ADHD and put you on Adderall if you cause problems in school. The thing is, I have a wonderful, I'm super lucky to have a wonderful parents, wonderful family life. I had a lot of discipline at home, of the very good kind. So I didn't cause problems in school, but I still couldn't freaking concentrate, but I didn't cause any problems. So they didn't think I had a problem. And I, of course, when I talk, even back then, I was eloquent and I could talk, and, and people didn't think of me as, having issues. Again, even though I couldn't concentrate. So they just all thought, oh, he's lazy, he doesn't want to work, So I just thought, I suck, But finally I was like, well, my thing was, okay, I better get good. So I had to find ways to adapt with it. So my mind moves incredibly fast, and it's only as I got older that I realized, oh yeah, that would be the ADHD.
Yeah, I'm the same. ADHD. I definitely grew up with I wasn't a naughty kid. I was just in the corner. I didn't have any friends or anything. I found it hard to concentrate on the stuff. But I also asked a lot of questions that I guess got me in trouble. I suppose teachers didn't like it when, I'd sat there and go, okay, we're in geography. and we have to learn about planet Earth. So why are we coloring in a map for? I'm confused. And I get told off for it. But yeah, I'm exactly the same. I've got an attention span that can stretch like no tomorrow, but can only be focused on certain things.
Absolutely.
And it's like, so I have multiple channels, and I get so many questions about this on TikTok. And people always ask me, why do you have multiple YouTube channels for? I'm like, 3 reasons. 1, YouTube algorithm. 2, complete boredom. And 3, ADHD.
People do not understand that if you have ADHD, multitasking is not a skill, it's a necessity. You have to multitask. Like right now, as we're talking, I have been like preparing things, and currently I am now walking around my yard. I cannot sit and have a conversation. That's not going to work. My hands are moving. I've been doing stuff with my hands the entire time, and I've probably walked almost a mile while we've been talking. So, and it's really funny. You mentioned Percy Jackson. I didn't actually find Percy Jackson because because of the weird time it came out. I was already a little older when Percy Jackson first came out. So so it wasn't until I was quite a bit older and completely grown that I first read one of the Percy Jackson books. What's funny though is I read Percy Jackson and then went, wow, if I had discovered this when I was 13, it would have been my entire personality.
Well, it's like, quite often when I interview people on the podcast, they apologize after for like going off on one, for rambling too much, or like, we'll divert off away from the interview. And like, I always say to them, you're talking to someone who has ADHD and can talk for hours. Like, if you don't do that, then it's not going to be a good episode.
Absolutely.
I'm like, go on.
Oh, this is absolutely exactly just how every conversation with my friends goes. So that's absolutely, this is just, to me, this is a perfectly normal conversation.
Prepare to dive into Universe 19. With many stories revolving around the Ultra Rangers, the Power Rangers, and the Kamen Riders. Joining them are the likes of the X-Men, the Avengers, and the Fantastic Four. But that is not all. You can also find stories revolving around Mega Man, Ben Tennyson, and Danny Phantom.
What do you think you're doing?
Doing the promo for Universe 19.
Okay, and you're missing all the important bits.
Which are...
Oh, I don't know. How about where people can find these stories?
Yeah, dude. Universe 19. I already mentioned that, actually.
Platforms. I'm talking about what platforms.
Oh, I see. Well, I can do that.
If you want to hear the tales of Universe 19, check out Power Rangers Universe 19, the podcast, for the Power Rangers, Kamen Riders, and Beetle Trooper stories. On the Marvel Universe 19 YouTube channel, you can find the Marvel stories, and the rest are spread across the following YouTube channels: Tiger Tales, Tiger Tales The Lost Stories, and Tiger Tales Game Over. Check out the ever-growing Universe 19 and all its stories.
Well, which, like, I like to think that's what this podcast is like, I don't ever want people to feel like they're being interviewed. I want them to feel like they're having a cool conversation where if someone listens, they might learn something, or might actually, like, want to check out your content or something, but also enjoy listening at the same time. And I've been told by people I've interviewed and people who've listened to the podcast that it just sounds like I'm having a conversation with these people, which is great. And I'm like, that's exactly the point.
That is definitely the experience I've had. And it's funny that you say that, because when it comes to the hypothetical questions, one thing a lot of people ask me is, well, how do you come up with so many? Because I've been doing hypotheticals for 3 or 4 years, and they ask how I can come up with so many. What I always tell them is, you don't understand. This is just what being my friend is like. Whenever I talk to my friends, they will be given. Most of these are hypotheticals, especially the ones that are in the beginning, were hypotheticals I would give to my wife, I would give to my buddies. And actually, I had a specific buddy who used to work with me, doesn't anymore, but at my job, we would get really bored. And one of the things we would do is throw back and forth these different hypotheticals. And a lot of the original ones about superpowers, because of course, the hypothetical question that started it all was that if you could choose any one singular superpower, which one would you choose? That was the first hypothetical we did, and we've kind of revisited that and did it with a twist a bunch of times, but that was the one that kind of started. That's one me and him had talked about, for hours at a time while bored at work. So whenever I say, when they ask, about having these hypothetical questions, I mean, that's just what I talk about. You guys are getting the full experience of just being my friends and getting to be pelted with hypothetical questions.
Yeah, I think that's another reason why I started stitching your videos. I was like, hey, I'm definitely I'm listening to you talking, and my mind's gone, well, I can answer with possibly 10 answers. Let's pick 2 and put them in a video.
Well, and another thing that people have told me that does my heart really good, that makes me very happy, is that a lot of times they have these nerdy interests and these things they want to talk about and these hypotheticals they would love to discuss, but the people in their life don't really support it. Maybe they're not as nerdy as them, or maybe they don't share the same interests as them, or whatever, or maybe they're just not lucky to have really good close friends who want to have these conversations. And them being able to find that here makes me really happy, because they can have those conversations with me that maybe they don't have someone in their life who wants to have. And as a nerd who has gone through a period of not having those kind of friends, now I am lucky enough. My wife is a nerd. My best friend, I have friends. I have people that I can have these conversations with. But I was the lonely nerd kid. I think everybody was the lonely nerd kid at some point, at least if they're a nerd. And I know what it's like to not have that. So I love that I can help people who might be going through that period until they get to the part where they will find their people. Because I'm a big believer that if you are a nerd, you eventually find your people. You'll go through some rough patches where you don't, but eventually you will find your people. But until you do, I'm glad that they can have those conversations with me.
Oh yeah, 110% agree. I definitely fall in that bracket. I've had friends over the years. I still have one friend who I've been friends with for 11 or going on 11 years now. He's my best friend of all time, and we're both really into Marvel and Star Wars and things, and we always dive in, go to the cinema and stuff like that. We're gonna go see the new Hellboy film this weekend, just for shits and giggles, because it's Hellboy. We're really intrigued how they deal with Hellboy and stuff like this. And he works as a phone operator. He works from home. I'm a stay-at-home dad, so it works really well to just we always message each other hey, apparently Marvel's doing this. We'll just bitch about it all day. But I've never had people to write, people to talk about writing stories and stuff. So I actually got into uploading my stories as audio dramas because I went on a podcast about Power Rangers, huge Tokusatsu fan, massive Power Ranger fan. I was like, oh my god, there are 2 brothers who want to talk to me about Power Rangers. Yeah, I'm doing that. Very first time on a podcast. And they're like, hey, come join our Discord server. I was like, okay, sure. So I joined their Discord server, and this is where I found these people. Now, they're my best friends. Story talking's all we ever do. I've never met half these people. They live in America. I live in the UK. There's 6 hours time difference. But these people will generally now message me going, hey, dude, how's your day? How's your son? How's your missus? And stuff like that. They actually generally care about me. And it all started because I went up to them and went, hey, you like writing stories. I like writing stories. Let's be friends. I finally have a group of people that I finally have a group of people that I can go, hey, story writing, let's go. So I definitely understand.
Oh, and that's also the thing. I totally agree. You talked about making friends through TikTok, and I have gotten that opportunity. I made some really amazing friends. I actually now, I know that you don't know this yet, but I now consider you one of my friends. We've had a fantastic conversation, and I'm definitely going to be talking to you later. So I've met some fantastic people through TikTok, and I've had I've gotten to people who've stitched my stuff. I've actually gotten to even have conversations with some of the bigger names. We talk about my 270K is a really nice number and all that. Taco Reacts, actually, I got to have at least a short. I wouldn't consider him a close friend, but we got to have a conversation. He's one of the 4 mil dudes. Tank Tolman, we actually talked a little bit back when, he's the nerd gym guy. We got to talk back before he got really big, and now you just can't reach him anymore. But we actually got to have some cool conversations. So those were some of the big guys, but those aren't really the people I formed the really good friendships with. Some of the best friends I made on TikTok was because I'm also a martial artist, and I don't talk about martial arts as much on the channel anymore, just because it didn't really, I mean, they did the videos did okay, but it's just a much smaller niche. So I don't talk as much about martial arts, but I am a martial artist. My wife's a martial artist, and I love that kind of stuff. So we, got into that space for a little while, and a lot of the other guys on martial arts TikTok, and I actually ended up going through a really interesting, fun, weird journey where we made a card game with a bunch of other martial artists, and it was not super successful. It never went to market because there was a lot of weird interpersonal BS stuff going on, but I got to make some really good friends with these really cool dudes, literally from all over the world. So I've gotten the opportunity to have some just super cool friendships with these people on TikTok.
It's funny that you said that you now consider me your friend, and I was about to say the same thing to you. I was like, just so you know, you're stuck with me. I say this to a few of my guests because, like, like I said, a lot of my guests come from TikTok, and I'm really grateful for that. And I think there's been about one or two guests that I don't think I've spoken to since I did the podcast episode with them. But there's been a good few of them where, like, I've now friends with them. There's a couple that I interviewed a couple of weeks back, and I'm now part of their Discord server. I join their live. They live in the UK as well, so it's really good. I join their lives all the time and say hello to them and everything. They they're very nice. And then there's a few of them that, like, we don't talk all the time, but, like, if I comment on their videos, they'll acknowledge me or something. But there's definitely been a few where, like, I'm now friends with them, like, generally talk to them and things. And, like, I say to a few of them, like, just say, no, you're now stuck with me. So you are now stuck with me.
Oh, absolutely. It was my intention to inform you have been adopted. So just letting you know, I just wanted you to be aware.
Awesome. Okay, cool. I'm fine with that. I'm cool with that. As like I said, the reason why I started this podcast was because there's a good buddy of mine. He has a podcast called If You Give a Dad a Podcast, and he interviewed me, and mostly about my stories, but he interviews big time people, wrestlers, voice actors, and all sorts of stuff. And, like, he's absolutely mad at the podcast scene. He's got episodes scheduled all the way until, like, the end of November already, and it's just like this. Like, I don't understand how he does it. Like, his brain just it's wired different. But after he interviewed me, I said to him, I was like, it's really cool just talking to people, and he has the same mindset as me. Like, he wants to just be a general conversation. If it goes off the rails, who the fuck cares? Sort of like attitude. And that's why I started this podcast, was because of him. I really enjoyed the way that we did it on his podcast. He's actually been a guest on mine a couple times now, because I always have guests return quite often. Usually what happens is I'll interview someone on one episode, and then the next episode they come on is usually, like, geeking out about something specific. So Jared, the guy that I just mentioned, he came back and we spoke about Angel, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer spin-off. We just geeked out about Angel for 2 hours. So, like,
and I just want to say that every single fandom you have mentioned so far, I am also a member of, just so that you know.
Well, we'll dive into that. I've got a couple of questions already lined up for that. Don't worry. I've been planning for the last 2 days because, again, my fiance is very encouraging about this and stuff, and she always reminds me if I've got a podcast, or, like, if I mention to her, oh, I might have an episode scheduled. So I was meant to record on Monday with someone in that lives in the same country I am, in Wales, and they cancelled on me twice now, so I may not better record with them. But I mentioned you, like, the end of last week or something, and this morning my fiance is like, oh, I do not remember his name. You did tell me, but are you still recording with him? I was like, I don't actually know. He hasn't cancelled on me just yet. And then as soon as you messaged me going, oh, I'm really excited about you later, I let her know. I was like, yeah, we're still on door. So, like, it's all good. So, like, it's all down. And because she watched me, like, make some notes on my phone of, like, starting geeky questions I wanted to ask you. I actually spent, like, I think, like, the last week just scrolling through your TikTok account, finding your questions that you've asked and gone, I really want to know his answers to these questions. So I've made a note of, like, which ones I wanted to ask you.
Oh, that's fantastic. And actually, that's a very common thing that a lot of people want to know my answers. And I've actually tried, because whenever I ask the question, because I like to include a lot of detail, I don't have time to give my answer as well most of the time because, TikTok wants it to be over a minute before they'll monetize you, which, more TikTok BS, but you know how it is. But they don't want it to be, but if it's much over a minute, no one will watch it. So you have to kind of like find a sweet spot, which I can usually give sufficient detail in that time, but I can't answer my own question usually in that time. I have done a series where my answers to my own hypotheticals, but I tend to not get that series done as often because it requires a little more labor on my part. I have to go back through, find the video, stitch the video, or download it and da-da-da-da. And of course, they don't like to do stitches, so I have to stitch the hard way where I download the video and then edit it myself, so it's a little more labor intensive. So I don't get to do those videos as much. But yeah, that is something that there is a lot of demand for, is for people to hear what my take on my own hypotheticals is.
Yeah, I made sure that I had a couple written down. I've had your TikTok account open on my internet browser this entire time we've been talking, just to make sure that if I again, ADHD, I've been scrolling through your TikTok as we've been talking, just to see if there's any more that scream at me, which there's been a few. So it's just I was prepared basically,
which is fantastic.
See, this is something else as well. Again, on the ADHD topic, I've been asked hey, do you ever schedule your questions? Do you ever write questions down? And 90% of the time, I don't. And people are quite shocked that I don't make notes. I don't write things down. I have a couple written down, but that was because you've asked the questions on your TikTok, and I'm just curious about your answer. I don't have any actual questions written down. It's just ADHD brain. I can come up with whilst you're answering one question, I can listen to you, have a conversation with you, but plan the next 3 questions.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
It's just the way ADHD works. Some people call it a superpower, and I understand why.
Well, and for anyone who maybe didn't get my Percy Jackson reference before, in Percy Jackson, one of the things is, of course, the character of Percy is portrayed as having dyslexia and ADHD. And basically what he is told in the book is, no, you don't. It's not that you have dyslexia and ADHD. It's that you're a demigod. And as the son of a Greek god, your brain is set up different than normal humans. You don't have dyslexia. Your brain is designed to read Greek writing. You don't have ADHD. Your mind is designed to work on a battlefield. And if you had told me that when I was 13, like I said, that would have been my entire personality. I would have been obsessed with that forever. Because that would have made me feel like what I thought was just something wrong with me was now my superpower. That would have spoken to me at a deep level.
Yeah. See, with Percy Jackson, I'm one of these people that if there's a film that comes out about a book or based off a book, and I've read the book, I'm going to rip that film to fucking shreds.
Absolutely.
I'm one of these people, don't get me wrong, I understand with comic books, it's a little hard to adapt things, and there are certain adaptations that I'm cool with, I understand, I get, how the film industry works, how, making a film works, I understand that. But when you are getting a book that someone has spent more time on, and stuff like this, and you adapt it, and you get things wrong, or you change things for no fucking reason, it does my head in. So it's no. So with Percy Jackson, I actually watched the film first. I didn't even know it was a book. I had no idea it was a book series until I got there was a stage in my teenage life, again, no friends, and I read so many book series in one go. I just flew for 2 years of my life just reading loads. And you mentioned the fact that your wife's book is really easy to dive into. It got me thinking about. Have you ever read or heard of Chaos Walking?
Oh, no, I haven't.
They did a really bad film about it. So basically the idea behind Chaos Walking, it's written by, I want to say Patrick Ness. It's a young adult sci-fi series, and basically the idea is that it's not exactly mind reading, but your thoughts are betrayed outward, so you have no secrets whatsoever, to the point where the main character's dog's thoughts are even projected. You can't keep a thought to yourself. Everyone's going to know what you're thinking. That's the idea of it. But my issue with that is the way that he writes his books. Don't get me wrong, they're a fantastic storyline, and tried my best to find an audio section of it, but the way that he writes his books are really hard for me to get into. And the storyline is so good, and I know for a fact I haven't even watched the film. I don't want to. I know for a fact it's going to be terrible, but it's just like it's so hard to get into. Stephen King, one of the a massive, huge name in the story writing fucking industry. But some of his books are so hard to read. Holy crap!
Stephen King is such an interesting. It's so interesting that you brought that up because I am one of those prefaces by saying, in a way, a giant Stephen King fan. I do love certain of his writing. Sorry, the thing is the way he writes is, in my opinion, absolutely awful. Like, you could almost learn how not to write a novel by reading a Stephen King novel.
Yeah.
Now, but the problem is, if that was all he was, you could just ignore him and move on with your life. The problem is his descriptions are so creative, and so many of his plots are so interesting and have such great stuff in them that it keeps making me come back to his stuff because I love some of the concepts and I'm willing to suffer through the BS. I often joke that you read a Stephen King book for the last 10 pages and you'll suffer through the rest of it, but those 10 pages might just be worth it, so you do it anyway.
It's like I tried reading his I think it's called Firestarter. And like I read the back of the book. It sounded really cool. I think I got about 11 pages in and I had to put it down. It actually gave me a headache. I could not get into the book, which was annoying because what I could understand of it was really fucking good. But it was just like I couldn't read it. It was so hard to read. And that's when I spoke to my mother and she was just like, she basically said the same thing like what you said. It was like, don't bother. Like, Stephen King is just like so good, but he does it in the wrong way.
Yeah, now I will say that it's so hard to find a Stephen King book that I would recommend to people because there's always so many caveats. There's always so many buts. Like, my favorite series of his of all time is the Dark Tower series that starts with the book Gunslinger. And if you didn't have to read that first book, I would actually recommend them to most people. They're pretty good. But that first book he wrote a long time ago. It's early Stephen King, and it's very hard to get into. The character is extremely unlikable. It's just really hard. And then it gets much, much better as it goes, but you have to get through that first book. But it's basically a dimension-hopping gunslinger cowboy type. It's actually really good, but yeah, that first book is a rough intro. One thing I will say is that anybody who listens to audiobooks as well as reads books, Stephen King is an audiobook guy. Definitely, if you ever are going to listen to any author on audiobooks, he's the one. It is so much easier to get through a Stephen King book in audio because you can just kind of, daze out for some of the really hard bits and, just the really nonsensical bits, the really unnecessary bits, and then kind of just tune back in for the good stuff. So I highly recommend Stephen King on audio for anyone who likes audiobooks.
So, if you could recommend, and you cannot mention your wife's book here because, I don't know how you would, but if you could recommend a book series or a particular book that you've read to people that are massive nerds, geeks that like reading, what you can name like one or two. You don't have to just name one, but like, what books would you say like your favorite that you definitely recommend to people?
Well, okay, I will say because, of course, don't get me wrong. There's all the classics that everybody knows, and I'm not going to recommend those because we all know those are good. I'm not going to recommend The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, because everybody knows that's good. I don't have to tell you that.
Yep.
So one I will say that is one I absolutely adore that is so underrated. It's called the Grim Noir series, like grimoire, but grim noir as in film noir. Yeah. And it starts with a book called Hard Magic. It's written by an author named Larry Correia. And the entire premise is this is set in the period between World War I and World War II, with the main character as a detective, so kind of think detective movie, but in a world where there is a variety of people who have magic powers that are called wizards, but if you're a fan of X-Men, they feel a lot more like mutants than wizards, including there are different people who have different types of people, like they have brutes who have super strength, they have sparks who have electricity, they have and the main character is what they call a heavy, who is a gravity manipulator. And It is a diesel punk. I don't know if you're super familiar with like the punk genre, steampunk, diesel punk, ether punk, all of those. But for any of the listeners who might not be familiar with what diesel punk is, like kind of how steampunk is, what if Victorian England had super tech? So steam powered power armor and zeppelins and things like that. This is more what if World War One era had, so instead of tanks, we have diesel powered power armor and Tesla towers and things like that. So it's a diesel punk story with magicians, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's called Hard Magic. That's probably like my favorite lesser known story that I would highly recommend.
That actually sounds pretty cool. I have to think now. Okay, so I think the first mine would be Gone. That's what the series is called. The first book's also called Gone. So Gone is about a town that's on an island, and the only way to get to the town, if you wanted to drive there, is a one road. And one day, every single person over, I think it's 16, over the age of 16, just blinks out of existence. They're gone. Every person.
Oh, wow.
So everyone from the age of 15 under is still on this in this town, and it's domed off, so you can't leave. All the kids can't leave at all. And there's it turns out there's a mysterious darkness that lives underneath this island, and it affects plant life, animals, and also some of the kids as well. Some of the kids gain super abilities. The main boy Sam, he has the ability to project light, and he has panic attacks. And he thought when he was a kid that there was a monster in his closet, but it wasn't. It was a ball of light that he would project. He just didn't know he was doing it. But he can project balls of light, and then as the story goes on, he learns to weaponize it. But the majority of the story is you've got a normal sort of like town with a really posh up, kind of I don't want to use the word wankers, but that's kind of the word I'm thinking of. Posh wanker, like sort of like college, university, like school, and they're the bad guys, and some of them also get abilities, and it's kind of like a war between the people that go to this like high top of the state university and the town. And then as the stories progress, certain things keep happening. Like I said, animals also get affected, and then eventually it turns out that there's a literally it is darkness itself that lives underneath the town, that literally has been there for forever, and the kids have to deal with it. And I think there's 7 books in the main series. Some really messed up things happen. There's romance, there's action. It's like it's the book series that made me sit there and go, holy crap, reading books is really good. And then one book which is more aimed at like young teens. But I've always loved the book series. I thought it was really cool. I can't remember how many books there are in the series, but it's called The Invisible Friend. So you have they're all about ghosts, and there's, I want to say his name's Arthur. There's a ghost, and he's just a normal looking kid. Obviously he's a ghost, so they predict ghosts as like grey, translucent, kind of like how ghosts are portrayed in like most things. And ghosts have jobs, so like there's sock stealers, and they literally steal socks. There's like ghosts that like scare kids in their nightmares and things like this, but Arthur doesn't have a role. He's tried being a sock stealer, he's tried to scare, and it does not work. So he finds this kid who gets bullied and starts like not helping him, but like basically helping him in a sense. He doesn't do anything major. It's more like by the end of it, they talk to each other, but that's why it's called The Invisible Friend. He makes a new job for himself, and he becomes the Invisible Friend. And it's a very kid-friendly book, but it was so good. It's really well written, really easy to get into. It was just a lot of fun.
And it's funny that you mentioned kind of the kid-friendly, kind of more YA type books. That actually reminds me kind of Sharon's journey, because one of the things as she's been writing books is one thing she thought about was kind of writing YA type books. And then kind of decided that really wasn't the vibe she wanted to go for. However, I think a lot of the writing style she kept, and that's actually one of the editors that looked at one of her stories at one time actually mentioned that it had a little bit of a YA feel to it. even though, of course, it's, it's not, when I say it's adult subject matter, I don't mean adult, but just mean, that it is a normal aimed at adults type book. But in that way that YA books tend to be very digestible and very easy to read, I think that's kind of where that element comes from in her writing, is that she had that kind of YA mindset. So I absolutely am a huge fan of the kind of the YA style books that are still really accessible for adults even.
Yeah, I feel like, I mentioned the fact that I want to get my son into books, and I feel like a lot of the books I want to get my son into, or at least read to him at least, kind of falls into that, like, they're kind of aimed at teens, young teens maybe, but like anyone can pick them up and read them, and adults can still enjoy them very much. And that's what The Invisible Friend is. That's what I think Gone is more aimed at teenagers to young adults to adults, because there is like some, I wouldn't say gory scenes, but if something happens, it's realistic, if that makes sense. Like
Absolutely.
like I said, Sam can weaponize his light to like actual blast people. So instead of just hitting, it actually burns through your skin. The guy who wrote the book actually describes like the very first time he does it, the boy that he hits is on the floor screaming in pain because he can hear his own flesh sizzling because it's cooking him, sort of thing. Like, it's realistic, but it's aimed at like the younger side of the audience. But yeah, I agree. It depends on the writers. There's have you ever heard of Wolf Brother?
Vaguely. I'm not super familiar with it, but I've at least heard of that one.
So Wolf Brother is how would I'd say Wolf Brother is the one book series that they better not adapt, because they would ruin it to all end of every scale. The woman who wrote the books actually lived with tribes in Africa, all over the world, actually like learning how to craft materials, utensils and things, actually living off the land for a couple of years, because it's all based in tribal times. It's all about tribes, and so she wanted, she actually sat with a pack of wolves for 4 hours and made notes of what they did, because the whole idea is the main character is a spirit walker. He has the ability to put his spirit into another living animal. And there's a bunch of shamans, they've all grouped together from different tribes, and they want to kill him because he's basically now a threat to their like evil plan. And he has a wolf. That's why it's called Wolf Brother, because he sees him as a brother. And she actually, some of the chapters later on are actually written from Wolf's perspective. He's called Wolf. The wolf is called Wolf. It's very easy to remember his name. But like the way that Wolf narrates his own words is very intriguing. The way that she does it, like us humans are called tall, tailless, because we stand on two legs. We don't have tails.
That sounds like an excellent book.
So like she'll so the main boy, the wolf, eventually they team up with a girl. Wolf, if it's in Wolf's perspective, he will say main tailless and the female tailless to differentiate which one he's talking about. And it's just a really clever way to explain something from an animal's point of view. And yeah, it's like, that was really well written. There's an interview of her where she says that she spent almost 6 hours, like 4 to 6 hours, just sat in a wolf's den, just making notes on how they communicate with each other. The fact that she watched a mother wolf snap at one of her pup's legs to tell it to stop doing something, and things like this. Like, she learned a lot about wolves that day, and that's how she managed to write from this perspective of a wolf. And I was like, that's really cool, the fact that she did that. Like, that's really clever, it's really well done. So like, if there's someone really into their own books, like how you explain your book with your wife, I think that's what also makes it intriguing, like, to read as well.
Oh, for sure.
So
you still there? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought we might have a connection. Okay, gotcha.
So we've mentioned adaptations. I've met adaptations. Has there been an adaptation of a book that you've generally liked, or at least accepted their portrayal of the book?
Oh, that's a good one. Let me see. trying to think of one that there's definitely, as you said, it's highly more likely to not enjoy them.
Yeah.
Now, I will say one it almost doesn't count, but I will say that because there are a few that I actually like the book, the movie better. I will say V for Vendetta. I'm sure you're familiar with V for Vendetta.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with that one. I think the film was actually like really well done, and I think it's easier to get into the film than the book is based off.
Yeah, the book it based off the comic book. I actually watched, of course, after I watched the movie, and I got to say, massively think the movie is way better. I liked both both in style, in substance, in messaging. I just think the book or the movie was entirely superior. Now, one of the reasons for that is V for Vendetta. Of course, I mentioned things I have consumed when I was a teenager that became 90% of my personality. Yeah, that was one of them.
Fair.
So I was super into it. So I will definitely say that's one where the movie is much better. Trying to think of. Oh, now one thing I wanted to get your opinion on, because you mentioned watching the Percy Jackson movie. Have you watched the new Percy Jackson series?
Okay, so ADHD brain.
Mhm.
One of my big issues is watching a TV series. I either have to do something. I write and draw, so that is kind of helpful. But I also find it hard to binge watch shows, and so I've watched the first episode, but that's it because it's now finished and it's there and it's waiting for me. And some part of my brain is like, it's all there. You can watch all of it, which means you're not gonna be able to watch it. Like, it's just, I don't. That
Well,
makes no
I do
sense.
understand that weird thing. But yeah, I was curious if you felt that they had improved on the because you are a Percy Jackson fan. I was curious if you thought in the series they had kind of improved over the movie, which kind of the same way. I've watched like the first few episodes, but not a lot of it. I definitely still don't think it's perfect, but I definitely feel like it's an improvement.
I definitely feel like what I've seen, because I have watched the first episode, but there are a lot of YouTubers that I watch that kind of like talk about adaptations and stuff, and I definitely feel like listening to what they've talked about and things, I definitely feel like they've improved. The TV show improves on what the film did, if that makes sense. So yeah, I agree. I think the TV show definitely did better.
Now, I will say, because as we say, ADHD brain. As far as books, like I said, the first one that comes to mind is V for Vendetta. But as far as adaptations in general, I think I've got to jump on the bandwagon of saying that we've actually have had some of the first video game adaptations that I actually accept as being worthwhile. Like Last of Us. I don't know if you were a fan of Last of Us, but
Right now, okay, right, okay, this is why we're gonna be friends. Okay, right, we're having this conversation now. Okay, so Last of Us. Oh my god, I love both games. The games are absolutely fucking. It's some of my favorite games of all time, and I remember the day my friend James, the one that I mentioned that I've been friends with 10 years. I got him playing the games. Now, when the TV show came out and the trailers came out, I was not on board. I was like, no, how dare you? You're going to ruin my favorite game of all time. Screw you. Fuck this. I'm done with the world. I'm going to move to Mars. All that jazz. So James watched it. And then he came to me and he was like, no, dude, you need to watch it. Now, James is kind of like me. If they ruin a game into a movie or a TV show, he's going to be skeptical. So the fact that he came to me and went, I have the whole series on Blu-ray. Let's watch it. And that is the only TV show in the last 2 years I have sat down and I've binge watched. My fiance was out of town. My son was over his mother's. I had 2 nights and like 3 days to myself. James came over and slept over and we just binge watched all 9 episodes. And holy crap, that is so good. The second season's trailer just came out today. That looks really good too. I'm so on board. I cannot wait.
I'm the same way. I adored Last of Us. I am a huge zombie fan. Zombie media is one of my favorites of all time. I actually, for a period of time, and I probably will revisit it, actually had a second TikTok channel called Will It Zombie. So that was all focused on zombies, and we actually tested various things, like we tested weapons, we made weapons, I tested different skills, like, how to make a sewing needle out of a thorn, that kind of stuff. And I will be going back to that. I just kind of, due to TikTok being weird and having technical difficulties, that channel kind of got abandoned temporarily, but I will be back to it. So I'm a super fan of anything zombie related. Loved Last of Us, whenever I heard, like Pedro Pascal, and then I forget the actress's name who played Ellie, I wasn't down. Same thing. Of course, it was still so funny listening to you and hearing you echo the same things I thought. I didn't like the casting. I didn't think this was going to work. I thought this was terrible. Then I actually watched it, and I have to say, they nailed it. She didn't look like Ellie to me, but she acted perfectly, completely sold me. Pedro Pascal is really interesting because I'm a Texan. Joel, the character, is also a Texan. And what's funny is I knew that Pedro Pascal is originally from Chile, wherever you want to pronounce it. I'm terrible with my pronunciations, but he's originally Chilean. The thing is, whenever I heard him and I've heard him do other parts where he did different accents. The thing is, whenever he was doing Joel, I was like, okay, that's not someone doing because I'm very particular about Texas accents, because usually people they cartoonify them. When they're doing a Texas accent, they make it over exaggerated, this redneck type accent. And I'm from Texas. I have a little bit of radio voice on right now, but I mean, I speak with a Texas accent. And when I heard him doing that Texas accent, I'm like, that is perfect. It's so perfect, I guarantee he's from Texas. There is no way a non-Texan is doing that accent correctly. Because to me, he did not sound like he had an accent. That sounded like a normal person talking, which means they're speaking with your accent. That's actually a joke I often make. If you think someone doesn't have an accent, quotation marks, it just means they have the same accent as you. Everyone has an accent. And turns out, he grew up in San Antonio, which is, also in Texas. So I live in Houston, which is south, which is far. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's more distance between Houston and San Antonio than there are, I think, any 2 points in your country entirely. But they're very far away, but they're both still Texas. Because Texas is huge. But once I found out that they got Pedro Pascal, who is a Texan, who, yes, he was Chilean like when he was 4, but he grew up his entire life in San Antonio, which is why he does a perfect Texas accent. So that completely sold me on him. I loved Pedro Pascal as Joel, and they were the changes they made, I felt, were all to the positive. They were changes I was okay with them making. They stayed very true to the characters. They kept the whole point of the series. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I agree. So like you mentioned Ellie, she doesn't look like the character at all. I feel like, and I'm not dissing her at all here, but I feel like she's very round-faced, where I feel like Game Ellie is very like slimmed-faced. Like she's like the live-action actress is very like chubby-cheeked. But like I wasn't on board at all. I found out they weren't going to do the spores. They weren't going to do the gas mask thing. They weren't going to show off the fact that Ellie can just walk through it and stuff like this. But then when I'm watching it, I'm like, I can see why they didn't do that. That'd, one, be very hard to actually pull off, and stuff like this. But two, the spores is a very interesting game mechanic. It makes Ellie seem a bit more badass in the game because she doesn't need a mask at all. And stuff like this, but like it's little things like her attitude. They got her spot on in the first couple episodes, how cocky she is and witty she is and sarcastic, and like just how like she doesn't give a flying fuck with who this man is. She doesn't care or anything like this. She got it spot on, absolutely loved it, and they expanded on things. There's a whole episode dedicated to a character that is in the game for 25 minutes who gives you a car battery. That's all he is in the game. They gave him a whole episode, and that's one of my favorite episodes of the entire series.
Absolutely.
And it's just like, how the fuck do you do this? They explored Joel's daughter, who again is only in the game for 10 minutes and then she's dead, but they gave her, the first half of the first episode is all about her. That's literally it. You don't really see Joel in the first 40 minutes, really. Not really. It's all about the daughter. Sarah. And another thing I love as well is all of the voice actors are in the TV show. I think that's absolutely awesome. Marlene is the same actress, actually. So Ellie's voice actress plays Ellie's mum, which, again, I think that's absolutely fucking spot on. I think that was such a good idea. And I think it's really funny how Joel's voice actor, who is Troy Baker, one of my favorite voice actors of all time when it comes to gaming, he is one of the cannibals. I think that's absolutely hilarious. I think that is so funny. The fact that he's playing one of the very minor villains in such a big TV show, which just also shows how much the voice actors of the game, supported the fact that they're making it into live action.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that I love about, and that weirdly ties into my YouTube channel, is that I love about Last of Us, is that the end of Last of Us, where Joel makes the decision to kill all the Fireflies in order to save Ellie, is such an interesting philosophical question and such a hot thing that I love to debate with people and love to ask their viewpoints on. Specifically, and one thing that I have noticed in asking people that question is a really weird dynamic of the people you would expect to give you one answer are usually the ones who give you another, and vice versa. Because one thing I've noticed is that whenever I ask a person who, if you were to generally ask them, they would say they're a really good person. They're the type of person who is very focused on doing the right thing and doing good things. They would describe themselves as a good person. And if you ask them, a lot of them will say Joel did the wrong thing. And they will actually say that Joel shouldn't have sacrificed the Fireflies and kind of all of humanity in order to save Ellie. Whereas if you tend to ask the other people, a lot of whom I am friends with, who will happily tell you they're not the best people in the world. They're just not concerned with trying to be a good person. Most of them weirdly really are very good people, but they're not super, they're not super trying to project the fact that they are a good person. Most of them are the ones that are like, no, yeah, he loved her. Of course he protected her. You protect the ones you love. And so I find it really funny that the quote-unquote good people are often the ones advocating for killing the young girl, and the quote-unquote, rogue bad people are the ones saying, nah, of course I would save the girl I love like my daughter. So it's just really funny. That's such a fantastic hypothetical. I have even proposed it on my channel before. And I just find it so funny that it's kind of flipped of what you might expect.
Yeah, I was skeptical about some things, like that scene when he has the choice, he has the decision, and of course, adapting a video game is a lot harder than adapting a comic book, in my personal opinion, because a video game you play the game. So obviously, in the game, you're running around with an AK, which is a gun you don't get in the game, and you're just blasting through floors of people. You're going through the hospital, you're killing floor upon floor upon floor of people. What would take you 10 minutes to accomplish in the actual game, you're slaughtering in about a minute and a half. That's how badass you feel, which puts this perspective of an AK-47 in massive regards in the game and things like this. But they did the scene really well. You can see him contemplating it and things like that in his head. There's also the little African American boy that Ellie makes friends with, who ends up getting bitten. And that I was so scared about that, because that is one of my favorite scenes in the game. It is fucked up. It's so messed up. But the way they did it in the show, they did it right. And I was like, oh my God, thank God for that. And season 2 is obviously based off the second game. A lot of people I spoke to don't like the second game. I actually really enjoy it. I think it's really cool. I love the fact that Abby becomes what she wanted to kill. I think that's such a cool character arc for her and things like this. And one thing I would agree on is Abby does feel rushed in the game. She feels like a very rushed character. She feels like it's a very quick transition from, hey, let's go kill these people, to I need to protect this person. It's almost like the flip. What should have been a whole story just isn't there. So the fact that they're willing to give a side character who's only in the game for 25 minutes a whole hour-long episode, it does give me some hope that, hey, maybe they'll do something. There's a big theory that the season 2 won't cover the whole game. Apparently, it's only going to cover the first half, and then season 3 will be the second half. So I'm very happy with that as well, which means we'll have more time on it, because number 2 is really long. Number 2 is I think 5 hours longer than the first one. So it's stupidly long. But I'm so excited. And it's not that far away either. So I'm really, really hyped for it.
Oh, and I actually do have a really strong opinion, and I do think some kind of writerly insights on what is wrong with the second game. Overall, I loved the game, but I think I can find the problem because of how I felt about it whenever I started playing Last of Us 2. My wife was sitting there watching me, And I'm just sitting there raving about, oh my God, this is the best game ever. This thing may be better than the first one. I adore this game. I'm just geeking out. I'm loving this game so much while I'm playing with Ellie. And then we get to the part where I flip to the other character whose name I'm blanking on, the antagonist. Abby, yeah. Then we flip to Abby, and for me, it feels like the story grinds to a halt when we jump to Abby. And I began contemplating, do I even want to finish this game? So so it's definitely in their presentation of Abby. And it's not that Abby's not a good character, she is. It's that you made me love Ellie, you made me love Joel, you made me care about all this, then you dump me in the seat of the antagonist, who I have been hating this whole time. But you don't do anything to make me care about this antagonist. And I think and this is also something they will have the opportunity to fix in the series, which is why I'm very excited, is I think that if you had been having me switch between Ellie and Abby in the beginning, then I actually would have cared more about Abby. Then I would have felt more like, okay, whenever I'm in Ellie's shoes, now I'm scared about the fact that I'm going to kill these people that you made me care about as Abby. Because they had you go through as Ellie and kill all these characters. Then they switched to Abby, try to make you care about these characters, by the way, that you have already killed. You know these characters die. And they try to make you care about them. But if you already know you have killed this character, like I use the dog as a reference. You've already killed that dog as Ellie. That dog came at you, you stabbed it. You're like, okay, weird choice to throw a dog at me here, but okay, you stabbed it. Then when you're Abby, they try to make you care about that dog and try to personify it, but you're like, but I know I already stabbed this dog. So you're resistant to caring about that character versus if you had given me those scenes with Abby with the dog in the beginning and then had it come at me as Ellie, I would have had feelings. I would have been really upset, but because they did it first Ellie, then Abby, I didn't care anymore. These characters in my eyes are already dead. I've already killed them. So it's hard to make me care about them. So they will have the opportunity to fix that in the series where they tell the stories at the same time and make me care about them and then make me watch Ellie kill them. And then I would care a lot more. So I think that's kind of the issue and a way that will help to fix it.
Yeah, me and James have spoken about this a lot, and I've always said that what they could have done is do Last of Us 1. And obviously it ends with Joel lying to Ellie saying, oh yeah, it didn't work, it failed, oops, sort of thing. And then Last of Us 2 should just been about Abby. New character, they're not going to explain anything, hey, here's a new character, play this game, and don't, if they did a game just about Abby, end it with her finding out what happened to the Fireflies. That's the last scene. Don't even put it in the trailers. Don't even explore it. It's not even part of the main game. Just have it so her last scene is her finding out that these people that she's deemed family are dead. And then the third game comes out, and that's what Last of Us 2 should have been. Well, hang on a minute. You've given us one storyline with Joel and Ellie. And then you've given us another storyline with this Abby girl who, by the way, the last set of events of the first game is the last set of events of the second game. Now this third game ties them both together. That would have been better. I feel like that would have made you kind of feel, you've played the second game. Abby's the main character. You've grown to love her. She's got different skills than Ellie and Joel does. Her entire family said, holy crap, that's Joel. We know that Joel did that. How are they going to... And then this third game comes out, which is what the second game would have been. It would have been... the payoff would have been better. And I've seen the trailer to the second season, and there's one thing they've changed. But in a way, I'm very intrigued that in the game, Abby is a butch character. She is muscle packed. She is a walking tank. She could kick you on your ass and you know it. But in the trailer to the second season, she's your average, normal, very slim, pretty girl. And I like that. That makes her more human in a sense, because Abby is a beast in the game. You know for a fact that when she kicks you, it's gonna hurt. When she's swinging a weapon into a zombie, it's gonna hurt. When she kills clickers, she can with her bare hand, and it. There's a reason why Ellie struggles to fight her in the game. But in the series, they haven't done that. They've put her in the same sort of category as Ellie's actress, which means when they do fight, if they do fight, they're gonna be even.
Well, and what's funny is I kind of have a different feeling about that choice, and because I'm not as crazy about that choice. Now, now I do kind of get where you're coming from, and I do sort of see the thing of making her kind of a more even, more vulnerable thing. But one of the places that me and my wife are very frustrated with media a lot of times is media does not like showing more than one body type for women.
Oh, I completely agree with that. I completely agree with that.
And of course, like, because my wife, my wife is disabled now. She has MS, but whenever she was young and whenever we first started dating, my wife is more of an Abby body type. She was a Taekwondo women's champion. She did powerlifting. I mean, my wife has that more sturdy, stout female body type. And you don't get to see that in media very often. So when she saw Abby, she was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing. This is a girl who, this is that represent." It's like my wife was also a huge fan of in Encanto whenever they had Luisa. I think it was Luisa, the sister who was incredibly strong.
Yeah, I don't hear about.
So many people loved her, and a lot of women who had that body type and were the stronger, stouter, females really loved getting some of that representation. And while I agree with you that from a strict storytelling point of view, we can, having her not be as much of a beast, as much of a tank, I can see it. I do hate that it was one of our few representations of this different body type for women that they're taking away because, oh, come on, that was so cool to have that. And it's not like they can't find an actress with that body type. They just don't like to, because there are plenty of actresses who are just absolute units. Those exist. They're out there. They could have found one, but if I thought they were doing it for the right reasons, I would be more accepting of it. But I have a feeling that they probably didn't choose that. I think they just couldn't quite stomach having a woman that looked like that. So it makes me a little skeptical. So I'll have to see how they do. But that was one of the things that I didn't like hearing as much, was that they had changed Abby's body type.
Oh, I completely understand what you're saying, and I could be completely wrong. And when the season is finished, I may have a completely different opinion. I may come to you and go, "Dude, that was absolute bullshit." That I could be completely wrong here, but my fiance is a very curvy woman, and one of my business partners' wife is a very curvy woman. My parabatized wife is a very curvy woman, and I agree, because my fiance is very much into her reality time TV shows. He watches a lot of things like Love Island and all that stuff. And the one thing her and her friend always mention is the fact that there are no curvy girls. It's always thin, it's always petite, and don't get it wrong. I'm one of these people that I actually enjoy granted, Abby's storyline is, like you said, is a bit thrown here and there. That makes sense. But playing her as a character, as in the gameplay sense, I feel like a beast playing as Abby, and I like it. I like the fact that when she stamps on a clicker, and it head explodes, and that's just her body weight doing that. It's so fucking cool to see. It's really cool to do that. So I completely understand where you're coming from, and it's a shame that if an actress is of a larger body type, or a built body type, or a whatever, it's usually in comedy, and it's usually laughed at.
Exactly. Which, like I said, is kind of why Encanto, with it's why on TikTok you see everyone stitching the pressure song with her singing, and people going, oh my, am I into this? Because that is a thing that we don't get to see, and this character having been depicted so well, because when you want to see these, if you want to see different body types in women, there's just a limited number of them. There's not that much representation for it.
Yeah, and it's a shame, to be honest, because there's so many fictional characters that play on the idea of, hey, you could, okay, I'm gonna use Spider-Man for example. He's the biggest example I can use. Even the guy, Stan Lee himself, even said he wanted people to believe they could be Spider-Man. Peter Parker is a geeky kid. He went through high school. He's bullied a lot. He's got a really crappy job. His boss doesn't even like him, etc., etc. Everyone can relate to Peter Parker, and people literally have argued on. I've seen people bitch about it on TikTok. The whole point of Spider-Man is that you can feel like anyone can be under that mask, because that's the whole point of him. And Power Rangers have.
Let me pause you for just 1 second. I need to take care of something. I will be right back.
Warning. This podcast episode is far too long. Cannot compute. Machine will implode. Earth is in great danger if you carry on listening to this full-length podcast. So, we must cooperate with desperate measures. The Earth is at stake. Must take desperate procedures. Procedures in process. Processing. Measures countered. We have instructed and activated the Part 2 procedure, which means if you wish to continue to listen to this episode of the Tiger Nexus podcast, you must tune in next week for Part 2.
This podcast is a production of the Three Ranger Bros Studios, in association with Zio to Hero, the podcast.